Jon fell to his knees. He found the dagger's hilt and wrenched it free. In the cold night air, the wound was smoking. "Ghost," he whispered. Pain washed over him. "Stick them with the pointy end." When the third dagger took him between the shoulder blades, he gave a grunt and fell face first into the snow. He never felt the fourth knife, only the cold. Oh, Jon Snow, you had so much potential. You were supposed to turn out to be a secret Targ who would turn out to be Azor Ahai Reborn, the prince that was promised, the Song of Ice and Fire, slayer of White Walkers, lord of the Seven Kingdoms, protector of the realm, warg and ride some dragons, save the day, and live happily ever after. But this is Westeros, and you just got Julius Caesared in A Song of Ice and Fire's very own homage to the Ides of March. So where do we go from here? Well, here's the thing. Sure, Jon Snow got stabbed several times, 4 times to be exact, but unlike Julius Caesar, his death was not final. We don't see his head hacked off or squashed like a watermelon or his body burned. And there are no further point of view chapters at the wall in which his death could be confirmed or refuted. Instead, all we get is a nice little cliffhanger which, true to George R.R. Martin's style, is vague, ambiguous, and extremely frustrating. And so the question remains, is Jon Snow really dead? Well, it's completely possible that he is, as George R.R. Martin has killed off major characters in A Song of Ice and Fire before, Ned and Robb Stark for instance. And as for the cliffhanger, well, George has used this before as well, with Arya, Brienne, Asha, and even Davos. And although each instance turned out to be a fake-out death, the difference between Jon and all these other characters is that we actually see Jon being repeatedly stabbed. But before we come to any definite conclusions, let's go back to the scene of the crime. Because if you recall, prior to the stabbing, Jon receives the pink letter, in which supposed author Ramsay Bolton not only claims to have defeated Stannis Baratheon and captured Mance Rayder, but also goes on to threaten Jon and the Night's Watch. And it's ultimately Jon's decision to reveal the letter's contents and announce his plans to march south, which breaks the last straw on the camel's back. The mutineers led by Bowen Marsh and Althel Yarwick catch Jon unawares in a moment of chaos and uproar, as the giant Woon tears apart Sir Patrick of King's Mountain. Woon rages, men scream, there's blood everywhere, and Jon as the Lord Commander in the midst of all this tries to contain the situation, and this is when the first knife appears. So overall, the situation doesn't look too good for Jon. He receives 4 knife stabs, 2 of which could turn out to be quite severe, and it also doesn't help that in the moment in which he is stabbed, there is utter chaos, making it very difficult for him to be attended to in an immediate manner. And so based on these observations, we could argue that Jon is dead. But what book readers will know, and what those watching the season 5 finale may have missed, is the huge amount of foreshadowing and very subtle hints in books 1 to 5 in A Song of Ice and Fire and seasons 1 to 5 of Game of Thrones, which allude towards Jon's survival. All these hints and foreshadowing lead to a number of plausible theories, which all insist that Jon Snow will be back. And each of these theories is supported by the possibility that although Jon Snow's body may temporarily die, his spirit will live on in the form of his direwolf, Ghost, and that his body will be stored within the wall until the moment is most opportune for him to be resurrected. Now, in terms of how Jon's spirit would actually enter Ghost's body, it could be explained by the process of skin changing, which, when concerning wolves in particular, is referred to as warging. Wargs possess the ability to enter the mind of an animal and control its actions. And it's said that warging becomes much easier if a bond already exists between the warg and its animal, whereas for those who are less experienced in their abilities usually only unconsciously warg an animal, often during sleep as the mind is already in an unconscious state, hence the common occurrence of wolf dreams amongst wargs. This is proven quite clearly with the Stark children, as we see Bran, a much more accomplished warg than Arya and Jon, develop a very strong bond with his direwolf during his coma, allowing him in the future to warg Summer and even Hodor on command. Jon's ability to warg Ghost is first implied in A Clash of Kings, in which Jon has his first wolf dream. In his wolf dream, Jon is able to sense members of Ghost's family, and this is possibly due to Ghost's close bond with his packmates. Through Ghost, Jon is even able to communicate with his brother Bran via the Weirwood tree, which is not surprising considering that when experiencing wolf dreams, wargs can be sensed by individuals with the green sight. It is also said that although a warg's third eye may be closed, in sleep it may flutter open, allowing the warg to experience wolf dreams. And it is with Bran's guidance that Jon learns to open his third eye, which in turn leads him to discover the location of the wildling host camped nearby. Now, although it seems that with the help of Bran, Jon was able to briefly open his third eye in his wolf dream, it's arguable that Jon's third eye is not fully open, in comparison to, let's say, Bran, the wildling Varamir Sixskins, or even Arya, as all these characters have come to accept and nurture their abilities, whereas Jon still seems confused and unsure of his abilities. It's also possible that the third eye only fully becomes open during extreme circumstances, such as a life-threatening event. For instance, Bran begins to open his third eye during his fall-induced coma and Arya during her blindness. So perhaps Jon's third eye will only truly be opened after his stabbing, allowing him to finally warg Ghost on command instead of just through his wolf dreams. So by now we know that Jon is a warg and possibly a powerful one too, as the wildling skin changer Varamir Sixskins himself mentions that Jon's ability, although underdeveloped, is strong, leading to the possible theory that as Jon began to lose consciousness he warged into Ghost. A closer look at Jon's final moments also gives further support to this theory. In the few seconds before he loses consciousness, Jon whispers Ghost, and although Jon is stabbed a fourth and final time, he does not feel this knife, only the cold. Now, based on what we already know of the bond between a warg and his wolf, it is very likely that Ghost would have immediately sensed Jon's pain and fear, simultaneously allowing Jon to reach Ghost and warg him. This would also explain why, although Jon does not feel the fourth knife, he does feel the cold, as when Varamir Sixskins dies and begins his second life, he feels a very distinctive rush of cold. And so Jon's ability to feel the cold yet not the fourth knife could once again be referring to the process of warging. Now, although by warging Ghost, Jon's spirit would continue to exist as a second life, his body on the other hand would cease to exist. We get our most detailed look at this second life in the prologue of A Dance with Dragons, in which the dying wildling Varamir Sixskins gives us an account of his experiences as a skin changer. And it's arguable that it is this very prologue which presents the greatest amount of foreshadowing regarding Jon's ability to live a second life within Ghost. In particular, we learn that when a warg dies, he or she is able to live again through their wolf, and this is referred to as the second life. However, this life becomes permanent and final, and therefore the warg is no longer able to bond with other wolves, but remains confined to this single wolf, and when this wolf eventually dies, the warg dies as well. Now, with all this being said, although it's completely possible that Jon may live out the rest of his days as Ghost, this prospect just does not seem very likely considering that his character is constantly alluded to throughout the books as being of great importance. I mean, sure, major characters such as Ned and Robb Stark have been killed off before, but we have to remember those characters were not endgame material. Jon Snow clearly is. He's over in the north, the leader of an ancient underappreciated institution, which at this moment in the story seems to be the only hope for the impending destruction coming to the realms of men, courtesy of the White Walkers and their crazy zombie whites, which seem hell-bent on killing everyone and everything in their sight. Without Jon, the entire storyline at the Wall along with the rest of Westeros becomes pretty hopeless, which is why the second part of the theory regarding Jon warging Ghost seems so appealing. This being that although Jon Snow's spirit may temporarily leave his body to live on in Ghost, unlike other wargs before him, Jon Snow's second life inside Ghost would not be permanent, as when the moment is most opportune, his spirit would return to his preserved body and he would be resurrected. A possibility which is clearly alluded to in Melisandre's point of view chapter in A Dance with Dragons, in which Melisandre has a vision of Jon as a man, then as a wolf, and then as a man again, which seems to be a pretty solid description of Jon working Ghost and then returning to his own body. However, there are a few different things which would have to take place in order for this to occur. To begin with, Jon's body would have to be preserved in some manner, and although it's cold at Castle Black, it's not cold enough to keep a corpse from decomposing, which is where the wall comes into play. Because if you recall, there are several ice cells and storerooms beneath the wall. It's where the prisoners of the Night's Watch are kept, where the food stores are located, as well as where the 2 wildling corpses found at the Weirwood Grove are kept. Now, this isn't just some random idea, as with the warging, it has been alluded to a number of times throughout the books, especially in A Dance with Dragons. Indeed, Jon makes quite a few visits to both the ice cells and the storerooms, the first of which consists of him as a prisoner in A Storm of Swords, and then in A Dance with Dragons to visit the imprisoned Cregan Karstark, to inspect the wildling corpses, to check on the Watch's food stores, and most recently to deal with the upkeep of the ice cells. And on each occasion, Jon mentions either the freezing cold nature of the wall or its remarkable ability to preserve. And apart from this, there is also Bran's dream in A Game of Thrones in which he dreams of both the present and the future. Most of what Bran sees is clearly in the present. For instance, at Winterfell he sees Maester Luwin, Robb, and Hodor all present during Bran's coma. And regarding his mother and Sir Roderick, he sees them heading towards King's Landing to solve the mystery of the assassin's knife, the storm arguably foretelling what awaits them regarding Tyrion and the Lannisters. And regarding his father, King Robert, Sansa, and Arya, this clearly depicts the events at Castle Derry, with Ned pleading for a lady's life, Sansa crying due to a lady's execution, and Arya hiding Needle and her involvement in Nymeria's escape. The shadows, however, are clearly alluding to future events, as the shadow dark as ash with the terrible face of a hound is clearly Sandor Clegane, and the golden and beautiful shadow is likely to be Jaime Lannister, as this description not only resembles Jaime but has been given before. The giant in armor made of stone and a visor filled with darkness and thick black blood, however, might represent both Petyr Baelish and Sir Robert Strong. This being due to Littlefinger's family coat of arms, which consists of the stony head of the Titan of Braavos, and Sir Robert Strong's obvious lack of a head. And as neither Jaime Lannister, Littlefinger, or Sir Robert Strong have begun their direct involvement with Sansa or Arya during the time of Bran's dream, it clearly implies that this is a glimpse of the future, which then brings us to what Bran sees in the north. Now, prior to A Dance with Dragons, what Bran sees regarding Jon could have just been acknowledging that Jon is now sworn brother of the Night's Watch, living at Castle Black, near the Wall, where it's very cold, hence the images of Jon sleeping in a cold bed with all the warmth leaving his body. But with Jon's recent stabbing in A Dance with Dragons and the theory that Jon will warg Ghost and have his body temporarily preserved within the Wall, leads to the very likely possibility that, as with the shadows surrounding Sansa and Arya, this part of Bran's dream is once again a glimpse into the future. To begin with, the fact that the Wall is shining like blue crystal in Bran's dream implies that Jon is sleeping alone in a cold bed during the day, rather than the usual night, as it has been stated throughout the series that the Wall shines crystal blue during the day. Bran also notes that Jon's skin was growing pale and hard as the memory of all warmth fled from him, which once again alludes to Jon's body being entombed within the Wall, where it would become pale, hard, and ice cold. And so the constant focus on the preserving nature of the ice cells and the storm rooms along with Bran's dream seems to imply that the Wall will have a significant role to play in the future, as the location and manner in which Jon Snow's body will be preserved. However, Ghost and the Wall don't fully explain Jon Snow's fate, because as discussed earlier, it's unlikely that Jon would truly begin his second life within Ghost. Jon's working of Ghost is to be only for a short period of time, after which his spirit will return to its original human form. Now, the manner in which he would return to his body is not as clear-cut as how he would survive his stabbing, and so there are several different options which present themselves. And unsurprisingly, with each of these options, Melisandre has some form of involvement, all of which will be discussed in the second part of this video, so go ahead and click here if you want to learn how Jon Snow will return to his body.